What is going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back with another episode of the Two Guys Watching Football training camp preview series for your Baltimore Ravens. If you're enjoying this series, do me a favor, click that like button. And if you want to find your way back for more, click subscribe so you don't miss an episode drop. Today, I'm joined by one of my good friends. It's Adam Bonaccorsi of the Russell Street Report, the man that will be joining me in September to do the WTFlock Postgame Show here on Two Guys Watching Football. Adam, my guy, how is it going?
Beautiful day, counting down the days till training camp start. Cole, how about yourself?
I'm doing good. Did I butcher your name?
No, I don't think so. If you did butcher it, I've gotten so used to hearing it butchered in 30-something years that it's just kind of over my head at this point in time.
What have we known each other 4 years, and I'm still not able to say your name accurately? So that's our friendship, baby.
Well, we're doing these throughout the season. Hopefully, by the end of the season, we'll get it right.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about a very interesting group with it's probably one of the bigger positional battles, and that is at the tight end position with about 5 or 6 guys battling for the tight end 3 spot. So before we get into it, let's take stock of the group. Returning for the Ravens, we have Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle, 2 guys that I think all of us consider locks pending health. Then coming back is Eric Tomlinson and 2 UDFA guys from 2020 that spent the year on IR, and Jake Breeland and Eli Wolf. The Ravens had a few additions in trading for Josh Oliver, drafting Ben Maceman, who, as I talked about in the running back episode with James Ogden, I know he's a fullback, but I think he's going to factor into this tight end competition. So we're going to talk about him here. And they also brought in UDFA from Virginia, Troy Poland. So with that said, Adam, are you ready to get into it, my man?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
All right, so let's start with the big name in the group, and that is Mark Andrews. So he's solidified himself in the top tier of NFL tight ends, and I think he's done it in a pretty unique role where he's not necessarily playing like a full slate of snaps like a lot of these other tight ends, and that's just because of the Ravens scheme. He kind of comes in and out. He rotates with Nick Boyle if they're not in a 2 tight end set. So, we also have an interesting scenario where Andrews is up for a new contract. It's going to be a big contract relative to other tight ends in the league. So I want to start. Do you see it as a lock? He gets a second contract, and what do you expect out of him in 2021?
So I think it's a lock, right? I think he's about as much a lock as anybody else. There's the talk about, obviously Lamar is the big name. Bozeman, some of these other guys out here looking into second contract. I think Andrews is essentially a lock. We can go back to a Pitto or a Heap or whoever. When the Ravens find that guy at tight end, they're not going to let him walk out that door anytime soon. So I think they're going to get him locked in. I think the interesting thing with this is going to be the contract. You mentioned that Andrews has really solidified himself in that top, we'll say 5 to play it safe role, top 5 tight end in the league. But given his snaps versus value, it's going to be weird, right? Are you going to pay him like some of these other big names out there, the Kelseys of the NFL, who are playing substantially more? Or are you going to pay him, or is the Ravens going to try to drive that number down and say, well, here's your snap count, and here's what you're doing for us, and how well-rounded are you versus, they're going to try to take the number down where they can, right? I mean, ultimately, they have a baseline number they have to work with at the end of the day in the cap, and they're going to want to try to do whatever they can to keep him within those confines while still making him happy and obviously well paid. But I think it'll happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I happen to think so too. And like my expectations for him is I'm expecting much of the same. He's going to be one of their go-to guys in the red zone. I think he's going to rack up touchdowns again. I actually think his efficiency might go up even if his target numbers do come down with some of the other wide receivers. And you can weigh in on that too. But I can see I go back to the comment from Jesse Bates from the Cincinnati Bengals, and Spencer Schultz and I talked about this on the wide receiver show. He said when we play Baltimore, it's 89-15. Well, if the addition of Rashad Bateman can actually make a big difference, if the addition of Sammy Watkins can draw away some of that focus where guys like a Des Bryant, a Miles Boykin, a Seth Roberts haven't been able to do that, that's only going to increase the matchup for Mark Andrews in the middle of the field doing some of the things he does so well. They won't be able to bracket him over the middle on some of those seam concepts that he runs very well. So I think there is, even if the target numbers come down, his stats may either stay the same, which is good. I think he puts up great tight end receiving numbers, especially in the touchdown column. But it's going to be like anything with our passing game. It's going to come down to his efficiency rather than raw totals.
Absolutely. And efficiency is key to a prolonged career too, right? So if they can keep his snap count down, they can keep him healthy, they can keep him productive all at the same time. All of a sudden, a 5-year contract that he may end up with, just spitball numbers here. If they get him into a 5-year contract, we're not looking back in year 3 and saying, all right, was this the right idea? We're not putting too much wear and tear on him across the middle. He's not going to be out there taking as many hits as some of these other big names again out there, the Kelce's of the world, Kittles, and so on and so forth. So I think that that's the key, right? Increased efficiency via more wide receivers out there, more viable wide receivers, we'll say, out there opposite, Andrews in the middle of the field there. So, I'm all here for it. I think we've got a good one here. But I will say, kind of to your note, I don't think we're going to see an increase in snaps from him this year. I think he's pretty much where I expect him to be.
Yeah, and that's especially if we see some more 11 personnel out of the Ravens. It may seem, okay, we're going into 11 personnel, we're going to run, but they may actually prefer a Nick Boyle in some of those concepts where you can run effectively out of the pistol, out of the shotgun in 11 personnel. And, I've said it for a long time, and we're going to get into Boyle here in a minute, but, Boyle's a really nice tight end to have in an RPO system or a system that's utilizing those run pass options because he's a good enough receiver, but he's also the best blocking tight end in football. Maybe Kittle's ahead of him right now, but top 2, top 3 blocking tight ends. So for those RPO concepts out of 11 personnel, if the Ravens can actually get to a point to consistently use them, which is something I think we've all been expecting for the last 2 years, and it hasn't quite become as consistent as I expected anyway. I think it's something that, even though it may naturally seem like it's going to be Andrews' time to shine, we may still see Boyle in on a lot of those concepts.
Absolutely. And so the key with Boyle is going to be his health, though, right? And that's kind of what we have to look at right now. We haven't seen him yet. And understandably so. Nobody really expected to see him out there in OTAs doing anything, if at all, and we didn't. So I'll be curious to see come next week and beyond how much activity he's getting early on, and if we can start to translate that into the expectations early on in the season. And then that in itself parlays into this tight end 3 discussion about where the focus should be with the tight end 3. Is it more looking at, hey, we need somebody to temporarily fill more of a Boyle-esque role, or are we looking for another pass-catching tight end out there that we didn't have last year and haven't seen since Hayden Hurst?
Exactly. And that's actually, let's start there because, I was going to talk about Boyle, but, this is a Nick Boyle friendly podcast. I love Nick Boyle. You love Nick Boyle. Our friends listening at home love Nick Boyle. So, we don't have to drone too much on him. He's just such a good scheme fit. Like in any offense that's going to run the ball like we are, why not have a 6 offensive tackle out there? I mean, he blocks on par and run blocking with most offensive tackles, and he's a sneaky good receiver. So I think, if he can get back to full health, it's only going to, we've seen it before. He's only going to be the perfect fit for this offense as a dual tight end. So, let's move into that third tight end. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. It's kind of like, we have our receiving option in Andrews. We have our blocking dual hybrid guy in Boyle. And that's not to discredit, like, Boyle's a good receiver, or is it able to make you pay if you're just going to ignore him in that type of sense. And Andrews, actually, his run blocking has come quite a bit. So I don't mean to say that, it's your typical Madden, you're the receiving tight end, you're the blocking tight end, but we know what their strengths are. And even though the opposite isn't quite a strength, it's not necessarily a weakness either. But when we're looking at the skill set in a third tight end, what do you want to see out of that? Do you want to see the H-back move tight end that Hayden Hurst brought? Would you prefer to see more of a vertical stretching receiving option? Or would you prefer more of an inline blocking tight end?
The easy answer is to just really take the passive route and say, oh, whatever the team prefers, right? I don't know. If you would have asked me that question back when they traded for Josh Oliver, that late round pick, I would have said this is indicative of what they want to do. They want to get back into that move guy. They want to have the guy that can get out there and really rope these passes in. They miss that. They need that. But the moves they've made with Watkins and with Bateman, and they're adding more pass catchers to this offense, I don't necessarily think they're going to go extremely heavy into that market, right? It's that constant battle of go with what you know versus if you don't stretch, you don't grow. And we know this Ravens offense can hit the ground running and over anybody. I mean, realistically, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a defense that is going to stuff this team up at any capacity, and you can really take them on any different way. If they're stuffing up the middle, we can take it around the edge. We've got Lamar back there as well. There's many ways to skin the cat. The expression needs to die. But there's many ways to go about that. So with that in mind, I could see them doing more of what they're already well accustomed to, right? Is that, and I don't want to necessarily go with Mason, but Tomlinson might be that guy, right? Tomlinson is, out there to create a path in the road, put down the plow and truck ahead. But Oliver is the one that intrigues me the most. And just being at OTAs and watching him, just seeing how dominant he is. He's a big dude. He's a big, strong kid. The injuries are the scary thing. But if you took that factor out, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a kid who has a lot of potential. And, I'm not saying that he can easily step in and take Andrews' snaps and targets and receptions and put up duplicate numbers in the event, knock on wood that we lost him. But, you need that reassurance too, right? That in those events, you've got somebody there. So it's going to be interesting. To me, I think it's going to come down to where they feel the safest with somebody in the practice squad. That's it, right? So Is it going to be Josh Oliver? Do they feel like if they can boot him out and sit him in the practice squad, that if called upon, he's going to be sitting there? Do they think he'll be picked elsewhere, pulled up, to start the season or during the season? Or is it going to be somebody like a Tomlinson? And then again, Ben Mason's a whole different animal because the value he has is a good bit different from these other guys. But also it's a weird hybrid kind of thing where you feel like you can look at him in a couple different facets, and more so you just put draft capital into this kid. You're not going to risk cutting him and hoping to slide him into the practice squad there. So even in Mason's case, I think you're looking at a phantom IR kind of situation versus roster spot. It's got to be one or the other for him. I don't see any way in which they cut him loose and hope he sits to the practice squad. So I would say right now, Oliver is my lead guy for the third tight end spot. And I feel pretty confident in that. It's going to depend on a healthy Boyle, right? I mean, if we see Nick Boyle out of training camp to start on the 28th, 27th, whatever it is, the late 20s, if he's out there and at least running drills, right? I don't need to see him lining up and playing sevens out there. I just need to see him out there with the jersey on. I'll feel better. But if Boyle's progress is slower than we realize, then all right, maybe things switch up a little bit. Maybe they put him on the IR to start the season, able to pull him back midseason. I don't think we're going to get to that point, but I mean, you have to look at all options out there and see what possibly could happen. I think it's really going to depend on Boyle, and it's weird to say like the tight end 3 spot is solely dependent on Nick Boyle, but it really feels that way.
No, it's got to be relevant because his skill set is, blocking is sometimes, I think blocking in a tight end is, it's not flashy. It's like your offensive lineman on your offense. It's not flashy. It's not something that's going to earn fantasy points. It doesn't really get talked about, but it's such a crucial element of an offense like this one. So if Boyle is, even just slow to get going, and I just mean like where he's not going to be himself for a few weeks, which is pretty understandable. Right. They're going to look more of, okay, if we need to give his snaps a bit of a control, who's the better option? And so let's run through the tight end 3 options because there's quite a bit. I think it's the interesting topic. So, from what you've seen of Josh Oliver, what is his skill set like specifically, and how does he fit in the offense?
I feel like Oliver can do a lot of the same things as Andrews. I think you're going to be able to move him around. I think from what I've seen, he's pretty good at finding. And again, it's hard to say off of OTAs, but he can find the soft spot out there in the zone. He's just a big kid. I mean, he's a glaring presence when he's out there in the field. A lot of these guys, the Wolves, the Breelands, you get kind of mixed up and you start number checking across your roster sheet. Oliver stands out in the crowd, man. He really, really does. He looks confident out there too, and that's the one thing that coming off of these injuries he's had year after year,
Right.
seeing the confidence is a big key for him this year too. Because if he can go out there and replicate the highlights that he's had when he's actually been on the field with Jacksonville, I think that's going to be key for him.
And you're hitting a key thing, because when I went back and watched Oliver, I saw some drops. I saw some, but I tried to focus in on the drops, and me and Mike talked about this with a guy like J.K. Dobbins. There are drops that occur because the technique of the guy catching the ball is poor. That's where we're looking at a guy like, Brashad Perriman had some pretty poor hand technique. In addition to, he actually had strong hands, which is ironic to say, but he had poor technique when he was trying to catch the ball. But his hands, in terms of your ability to grip a ball, he actually had strong hands. So when I saw Oliver, there's a lot of concentration drops worked in there. And it reminds me of Dobbins, where he was having drops last year, but I didn't see any technical issues with how he was trying to catch the football. I was seeing he looks back, and then the ball's about to come in and his head's already upfield. And then you drop the ball because you lose concentration. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's familiarity, that's getting comfortable. It's also confidence, because if you're not confident in yourself, you have mental lapses, you drop the ball. So that's kind of what I saw from Oliver when I watched his tape. There's not a lot of sample out there. That's what makes him such an intriguing guy. I think that's why they said, this guy might get cut later, but let's go get him for the full offseason so we can get in here and get a good look. We're only giving away a 7th. We have 18 4th-round picks next year, whatever. So that's what they went out and did. So I think it makes a lot of sense. He's definitely more in the mold of Andrews, but I kind of liked some of his physicality, where I think he could develop. He doesn't currently have it, but I think he could develop his ability to block, and some of those, H-back sniffer rolls that we've seen from both Ricard and Boyle, where sometimes they're in the backfield a little bit. I think he could maybe develop some of that with really good athleticism. I've also seen a lot of lowlights, because these aren't hard to find, where he's just completely lost his technique when trying to block. So those do exist, but I think that's the type of thing they're going to be looking at. And that actually leads us into the next two guys I want to talk about, and that is Breeland and Wolf. So we didn't get to see a ton of them. We didn't have a preseason last year. Wolf barely played in college. It was crazy. When I tried to find college tape on him, there's just not a lot there. But they both bring that move tight end role, where both actually even split out. Well, I shouldn't say both. Wolf didn't as much. Breeland split out wide quite a bit at Oregon. And we've even seen that from Ricard, like I said, where he's kind of lined up in the slot, and then he goes in motion before the snap and does a sniffer roll out of the slot into the backfield. So, we know they're going to want to move guys around. They are they use such heavy motion. They're one of the top teams in the league. So I do think that's a skill set they're going to be considering. So, how do you see them fitting into the battle? Do they have a shot? Like, what do they need to do?
So I don't. I mean, so here's the thing. Look, for the last year, I've been on this Breeland train, right? Jake Breeland, watched him, coming out of Oregon. I was real high on him. I was like, I got another injury situation. It's going to take him a little time, but I think he can get that third tight end spot. Ultimately, we talk about Oliver and having those injuries, and the understanding that between those and a couple miscues that he may end up on the wrong side of that roster. Which, by the way, looking back at Jacksonville now, if the alternative is Tim Tebow, I think he would have been pretty safe at that point in time. But ultimately, the guy Wolf and Breeland have been dealing with their own set of injuries as well. So I don't see them having any major advantage there. Wolf, a little bit more playing time, right? A little bit more time with the team, should I say, than Breeland, who spent pretty much nothing at all. So he has that, but there's nothing about either of them that really stand out. And maybe that's just me expecting too much out of a third tight end. But I don't see any particular facet of their game that makes me think that they would be a must-have or somebody you can save on this roster. More so, somebody you can easily stash either of them on that practice squad if they really want to and feel confident about it. And then again, we go back to that. If they keep Tomlinson as a third tight end and you have a Breeland on the practice squad or a Wolf, do you feel like that's good enough? And if we need them, we got them there. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think that Breeland is still unknown to me, and I still have that little shred of confidence that he can show up and do something. But Wolf at least is a little more consistent and has been around the team a little more. And I feel like if they were to keep either of them around, it would probably be Wolf, to be honest with you, barring anything crazy that we see in the next month from Breeland.
For sure. And so I'm kind of on the opposite. And I'm just going off. I completely understand your points. I'm just going off what they did in college, what was out there, what that I watched. I watch the film, I take away what I can. It kind of ignores some of the things that I just don't see, and that's all the training camp stuff. So you have a leg up on me there. But from what I saw from Breeland, he's going to offer a little bit more of a threat as a receiver with some of those H-back moves that we totally think the team might want. We don't really know, but if we had to kind of speculate, I think we'd both agree. But Wolf offers that too. I just don't think he's going to be as good of a receiver. And I mean, the reality is it's going to be tough for these guys. Have a long hill to climb in terms of becoming NFL starters as it stands. So, and the next guy I want to talk about was Eric Tomlinson. We kind of already talked. I think we both see Tomlinson as, if Nick Boyle's not healthy, Tomlinson has a very, very, very strong chance of being around. If Nick Boyle's 100% healthy, it's probably a little redundant if they carry 3 tight ends. And maybe he's a practice squad. And I think he's a great guy to have on the practice squad because, he came right in last year and didn't really skip a beat. He filled that blocking role really well. He actually impressed me on a number of plays. Some of those veer blocks or arc blocks where he kind of had to get out and get into the second level. There was that the play where RG3 ripped his hammy. Tomlinson sets that block, and if he doesn't pull his hammy, that's a touchdown. That was 6. Tomlinson made his block perfectly, but RG3 pulled up, so obviously he didn't splash it. But so I think Tomlinson played super admirably. I hope first of all, I hope Boyle's healthy because he's going to be our the best player for that blocking role. But I do hope they can keep him around because I think he's a very solid player.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think that's the hard part with Tomlinson is that you look at him and you're like, if it wasn't for Boyle, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. We feel a lot more confident given the role that particular, that he would play in this offense. I'd feel a lot more confident in him. We'd probably be having a tight end 2 conversation more so, but considering Tomlinson locked in as a 3 or into his specific role, should we say. We may not even be looking at this as a 1, 2, 3 and more as just a ABC type role. So, I think that, again, it might be the guy that you're looking at in the practice squad. But again, now we're talking about Ben Mason too and where he fits into that. And is that become a redundancy issue at that point in time if Boyle's healthy?
So let's get right into that because Mason's fascinating to me because he did so many different things at Michigan. He even played on the D-line. He played fullback. He played tight end. He's a very versatile cat. And I forget who it was. I tweeted something about him. It was Donovan Peoples-Jones's brother, who obviously watched Michigan very closely. Right. And he sent me a DM and he's like, listen, the tape might not be there, but you can't say this kid's not versatile. And I think I was talking about his pass catching just because he literally caught 3 balls in 4 years at Michigan. So the tape's just not there. I'm not going to see Michigan practice film to be able to draw my conclusions. So he was just reaching out, and I think he did it more as he was just trying to give me some info, and he just said this kid's a football player, and what I think he meant is get him in there, get him playing, and he's going to be able to develop these other skill sets because he's just an athlete and can do all these different things. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, he's going to develop as an H-back because we just don't know. We don't have I don't have an evidence base to say that. But I will say that he intrigues the heck out of me because of all these things. He can block really well, and he does kind of come in that Pat Ricard, he was a D lineman playing fullback. He's a bigger guy, but he's also extremely explosive. Sometimes he overextends on his blocks, but when he does hit, he pile drives guys. So he's really intriguing in that aspect. And that going back to that whole athleticism, his ability to play different roles, I think he could actually develop a nice little special teams role. And so that's where my eyes are going to be peeled in preseason when those special team unit comes out. Who's on them? Who's doing what? Where's Mason? Because I could see a scenario with those last 3 roster spots that are usually for special teams specific players that actually get active on game day. Their position, I'm not going to say their position doesn't matter, because of course that's going to influence where your guys are. But I could see a fullback 2, a tight end 4, whatever you want to call them. I could see there being an extra running back or an extra tight end with Mason being active on the 53 if he has that special teams ability.
And that's exactly what it's going to come down to there for him. So I will say, and I'm smirking a little bit here listening to you talk, Mason. So I'm trying to do this the right way so that I can keep on going to camp, right? So without saying too much, I will say he has soft hands, and it surprised me. So when you see a bowling ball with hands like that, it just kind of, it caught me off guard a good bit. Yeah, I was definitely taken back by that. So that was a very pleasant sight to see. One or numerous times, I will not say, but it was nice to see, right? Because that's the one thing we didn't know. When you've played more years and you've had receptions at college, you don't know. So when you start seeing those things happen, that's a very good sign. And seeing what he can do, and man, that kid can turn his legs, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like so quick, like in an instant, he's got full speed going behind him. And man, he's great to watch. He really is. The question for me is going to be, is he considered more of a project? Not to make another Project Pat comparison, but is he considered more of a project at this point, or somebody that they feel, man, we can find an offensive role for you immediately and really acclimate you to what we're doing here and utilize you on a week-to-week basis? If not, and it's more of a, hey, we need a justification, it's going to be the special teams, right? It is absolutely going to be the special teams and where they value him there. So I don't, initially when the pick happened, I viewed it as, oh man, this is Ricard's replacement. But, as time's gone on, it's now obviously a little more apparent that no, this is just a 1-2 punch, man. This is something that you're not going to see out there much. And the role that Mason offers, again, it seems like this offense is very big on these hybrid roles and the chess game, and not knowing, you're not isolated to this specific role. You're not isolated to this specific role. We have you able to do multiple different things in this offense and keep the defenses guessing more. And Mason offers that ability. So it'll be very interesting to see, in the next month, how they move him around. I can't wait to see him in some of these preseason games and how obviously they're not going to show their hand in preseason, utilize him, but I want to see him catching passes in game situations and not just, in a scrimmage. I want to see him, leading the blocks here. I want to see him doing a couple different things out there to see what he's able to do in those situations at this level. But I have a good trust in the hardball to hardball connection, with the Michigan thing. So I think that gives me a little more promise there. I do think, though, that Mason won't end up tight end 3. Mason will end up that tight end 4, fullback 2 kind of hybridy kind of role there, if justifiable. And we've had this chat before. It's not going to be on the the quarterback position is going to be the one most likely to succumb to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you forget. It's not that I think preseason is like without it you'd be screwed, but as a fan you would, because like I talk about it with the offensive line all the time, and I talked about it with Brandon on Wednesday. Like, it's just, you can't see some of these guys and you can't get film on them, and it makes having a discussion about them so difficult. And so with a guy like Ben Mason, sure, it doesn't really make sense. It looks like they future pro fullback, which doesn't really add up. But there's probably a reason it doesn't really add up in our heads, right? Like, there's got to be something more to him. There's got to be, or maybe there's not. They made a mistake with drafting him, or drafting him too early, or whatever. But it's one of those things that it makes you think, and the only way to find out is through preseason. So I think that's where we're going to get so many of these questions answered. This group, like I said, it is the tight end 3 spot, so it's not like but we play 2 tight end sets all the time. And, even Hayden Hurst played quite a significant role. And the other interesting thing is in 2020, pre-injuries to to Boyle, we carried two tight ends. So, they weren't that concerned about it, but now they kind of have a bunch of guys that can fit into it. So it just makes your roster building that much more flexible. The best way I think I look at it right now is I think with an increased wide receiver group, I do think they're going to go heavier on the tight end 3. I think they're going to look for a blocking guy because I don't think they're going to be too concerned about the pass catching abilities. There's just too many other mouths to feed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that person that makes that spot doesn't need to be able to keep the defense honest. And look at a guy like Pat Ricard, like in that Titans game when they were just emptying the flats, it was the drive coming right out of halftime. Pat Ricard caught like 4 balls in one drive. Like it was insane. They just didn't cover him. And so, it's not anything special, but that's an element in the offense, that check down route. When the defense has to be worried about Lamar, they have to be worried about, the sidelines if Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins make the impact we're expecting. They need to bracket on Andrews. They need to protect deep against Hollywood. It's one of those things where if you can, it's what the Patriots did for so long. They just hit guys with checkdowns, and it just made you want to drive your head into the wall because there's so many things you had to cover. So I think it's going to be interesting. And I'm talking about the Patriots of the pre-Cam Newton, not post-Cam
Brady
Newton.
Pats.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be fascinating. So before we let you go, Adam, let's get into it. Give me your prediction. How many tight ends do they keep, and does Mason make it, even if he's not counted as a tight end 3?
Let me hit you with this really quickly. Who's the one tight end we didn't talk about?
Troy Poland? I didn't even mention him.
You did.
Am I missing some? Okay, so tell me about him. What'd you get of him?
So I'm taking that and I'm wrapping into the rankings here. I have him in that Mason range, and I have Breeland and Wolf down below him. And I'm going to tell you right now that he is very well-rounded. Very well-rounded. He surprised the hell out of me. So, and again, just OTAs, but you have to watch the little things like that, right? So, I'll leave it at that. He is very well-rounded, and I think he could surprise some people. And you're not going to see it until training camp, or until the preseason games. But I'd probably have him at 5th right now with Wolf and Breeland behind him. And again, obviously it's going to go Andrews, Boyle, and then you're going to go so probably Andrews, Boyle, Oliver, and then Mason. But again, Oliver and Mason are that like 3A, 3B, and it depends which direction the team's deciding to go, because I can see it going either direction here. But I will tell you this. If Oliver does not make this roster, he'll end up somewhere else as a productive tight end 2 somewhere. I genuinely believe that, barring health issues, he'll end up a tight end 2 somewhere else. So, but I do think we're looking at 3, possibly 4 if Mason is the 4th. And then again, I think the QB position we end up keeping 2. I know I said to the contrary for so long, and I was standing on the table about it, but I think we'll end up keeping 2. The more thought I put into it, and that's where that extra spot's going to come from.
So I'm the same way, and I do think Oliver gets the 3 spot, but I think Mason gets on 2. But, this may turn into an old takes exposed where I didn't even mention Poland. So, slap on my wrist for that. That's just disrespectful. So my apologies to Poland, who I'm sure is watching at home right now. But it's a good point. It's, again, one of those things where, some of these guys – with so many people stacked in. We talked about Wolf and Breeland so much last year that it almost felt like they played on the team, but they were just UDFAs that never really played snaps. But we were arguing over Wolf versus Breeland for the tight end 3 spot last year. So, it's going to be a bit of a mind adjustment there. So we're going to have to see what comes when preseason games start. We're about 3 weeks out now. So we're 2 weeks out now. So we're almost there. Yeah.
So
awesome. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Adam. You can find Adam's work on Twitter, @AdamBmore there on the screen. His articles on RSR are always a must-read for me. And be sure to come back to Two Guys Watching Football in the fall for the WTFlock Postgame Show, where Adam and I will be doing this. We're going to keep it light and friendly. It's going to be like your postgame show, just the boys having a beer, breaking up the game. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to keep it light. Do you have any last words for us, Adam?
No, I'll be out of training camp starting next week, and keeping some eyes on things for everybody. So, you'd mentioned, keep an eye on the Twitter. I'm officially returning in a week. I've been taking the month mental health break, so it's been nice. But yeah, I'll be back on next week, and I'll be hitting everybody in the morning. Hey, what do you want to see? What do you want me to watch for? So definitely keep your eyes there, and the camp report's following on Russell Street.
Love it. Love it. So be sure to follow them and take care of that mental health. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace.